Hello, welcome to our panel on podcast marketing and social media tips and tricks. I am Victoria Rogers. I am the producer and DM for the Broadswords, and all non-binary and women-led actual play podcast. And I have some amazing folks here with me today, and I am absolutely thrilled to even to learn some tips and tricks for myself, to be quite honest, from everyone, because they have wildly successful podcasts. We are going to go in order that's everyone's on my screen, so it might be a little different for you. We're going to start with Nika.
Oh, wow. Hi, I'm Nika Howard from Greetings Adventures. We're also a real play, 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons game. We've been going for like 8 years, a little bit, coming up on our 420th episode next week. And gosh, I'm excited.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Where can we find you on socials if someone wanted to find you?
Wow, I'm bad at my job. On Twitter, pretty much everywhere, at Nika_Howard. I made it easy.
Yeah, that is easy. Jen, welcome.
Hello, thank you, Victoria. And also great to meet you, Nika, in person, or virtual person.
As person as we can get.
As person as we can be. Yeah, definitely. The demon skin. You can't see it slipping on both of us. My name is Jen Vaughn. My pronouns are she, they, and I am one of the players, and I think it's art director of D20 Dames, a live play, all femme, family-friendly podcast, like the first family-friendly femme one. And we started in 2017. Kat Kruger, Brittany Lee, who was just on the last panel about producing, Jess Ross, and Maris Malale are on the podcast as well. And you can find me at the Jenya online. Just on the good places, not the dark web. Don't look for me there. So happy to be here and very happy to talk about social media and its many variations. Please feel free to ask questions in chat because absolutely.
Thank you. We'll definitely be having a question and answer period. I'm going to be answering all those questions for you.
Sweet.
And Daniel, welcome.
Yeah, hey, I'm Daniel Kwan. I'm a game designer, writer, any nominated cultural consultant, and any winning podcaster. I co-host the Asians Represent podcast and design games for a variety of companies. I'm happy to be here. My pronouns are he, him. I'm super excited to learn from everyone because this is cool.
Yeah, and don't you forget, everyone, we are raising funds for the Trevor Project, so please donate away. We are very close to our $500 goal. We would love to see that flip over during this panel, so please, please, please donate to this cause. And there will also be a giveaway this panel from the McElroy family. It's US only because shipping, but it is a very good book. It is Everybody Has a Podcast Except You. So please look out for ways to be a part of that giveaway. All right, we're going to start with the basics. Let's go 101. When you first started out, what are the things you wish you knew that you know now? Because I know there were plenty of things that I had no idea about. I was a baby podcaster. I didn't know what I was doing. I had $30 mics that I found off of Amazon. I had a brand spanking new Twitter account that I didn't know how to use. And I had Audacity that I had just downloaded. So I didn't know much. And I made things up as I went along. So why don't we start with you, Daniel? We went with you last for introductions. Let's start with you first. What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting with the title of the McElroy's book, because it's true, we live in an age where anybody can make a podcast, do an actual play. There are fantastic tools out there that enable you to do that, and a lot of free ones. Like Audacity is a fantastic tool that many people still use, or you can go and get like a free Zencaster account. Zencaster is another fantastic tool that you can use for free and get a lot of value out of. But I think the one thing that I had wished, so I've been podcasting for, God, I've been podcasting since 2016. A show that's no longer out, but I had the opportunity to interview like a lot of really cool people. Um, and one thing that I wish I had developed early on for Asians Represent, and we didn't do until last year, was develop a brand manual. Super important. Because when you want to collaborate with folks, when you want to collaborate with brands as you grow, or if you want to have clear guidelines on how you and maybe other people you're working with can maintain an online presence, having a brand manual is really important because you want to have rules and guidelines on like the elements of your brand identity and how they're to be used by others and folks you work with and collaborate with. Like what colors you're going to use, what fonts you're going to use, how your iconography can be used is super important, because a lot of people are going to go out and they're going to say, okay, well, I would like to get a logo designed by somebody. And you should absolutely do that. But it's totally worth investing in, having a conversation with a designer about, what your overall message is and who you are as a show, and what you want to achieve. Right? What makes you different from everybody else out there? And how do you communicate that difference through that brand manual?
What are some things that I want to drill down into that a little bit?
Yeah.
What are some things other than like, fonts you mentioned? What are some things that you think are really important to have in that brand manual?
Yeah, like aside from like iconography, typography, and like your color palette, a big one is like logo misuse. Like, do you want me to invert your colors or not? How can it be warped or not? Contact information. Typographic hierarchy is also really important. What is your primary font? What is your secondary font? What are any tertiary fonts that you're going to be using? Likewise, how you speak, your voice and your values are super important to be able to communicate. Now, when we want to work with like a brand or somebody wants to collaborate with us, I just send them our brand manual and it literally says, this is how we speak and these are our core values. If you do not align with these, I have no interest in working with you. Likewise, anybody who collaborates with us knows what we're all about, so that the content that we put out is consistent. Likewise, having a single voice and the way that voice communicates on social media. It's one thing to have a Twitter account, but if 5 people have access to that Twitter account and are all tweeting or retweeting, and you aren't aligned on your values and your voice, that Twitter account doesn't read as authentic, or doesn't read as authentically your brand.
I think that segues a little bit into what my suggestion was going to be too, because the brand manual is definitely one. And I come from a background of being a social media marketing manager for Fantagraphics books, for the Schultz Public Library, for an entire town, White River Junction, Vermont. Sorry, Hamlet. But so brand manual, like we had the colors sent out, but a guide of best practices to create for everyone behind the scenes. So having everything in one document to show whether you're using TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, like here's a sample of what our voice sounds like, the appropriate hashtags, alt text, and just having the regular alt text for what your logo looks like, so you don't have to rewrite it every time and then you'll miss things, because that is very important for accessibility. The same with hashtags, having like a capitalization as well. So and I say this as like, learn from what we say, not what we do, because occasionally like maybe you get sick or something, but it's the day where you have to publish something, or something new came out and like someone else has to take over. And then if you want that consistent voice, it helps to have that manual of best practices. Or maybe the group grows and you shift around, and that way you don't have to like just tell someone to like look back at your older tweets. It's like, here, I've got this little like 3-page document for you. That's very helpful. I would also say I came in also with like art skills, so I was able to draw the characters and draw the logo. But I do think in being able to find someone to also collaborate with the actual DM or GM is helpful, because they're going to want to make things that you can't see right off the bat. And if you don't have the opportunity or the money, that's where things like Pick Crew are now great. And they come in and they're very like avatar makers, so they can make things that are beautiful and easy to read, and they don't take a lot of time or money to sink, no money to sink into. So that way they can create NPCs for the game and for the stream or whatnot very swiftly. So sorry to hop on that, Daniel. I was just like, wait.
Oh,
No, that's totally okay. No, I thought your answer complimented mine. I mean, one thing you mentioned was actual play. Like we do an actual play, but one of the things we did to differentiate ourselves is like, look, let's be honest. Everybody's got an actual play, right? How do you make yourself different?
Mhm.
Right. And it's really important to identify that at the very beginning, right? Set like very specific, measurable, and achievable goals when you start. And having an arts background is useful, but also identifying what tools you're going to use are going to be really important at the very beginning.
Yeah,
Mhm.
you can't go wrong with Canva either as a
Oh,
tool.
Canva is
for,
wonderful.
oh my gosh, yes. Canva is yeah. You can upload logos, pictures, but then there's a lot of different settings for Twitter, Facebook, blah 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 blah. Yeah, and like you can tell sometimes when someone uses Canva, sometimes if they're like, you're like, hey, I recognize that background, but like what like that's what it's there to make it easier for other people to like get to the podcast. So check it out.
Like one thing that I wish that I would have done starting out is I did a whole bunch of like little free trials of things, and Canva was one thing. Like if you find an app, or I use later a lot of scheduler apps and things like Canva, don't I say don't waste your time with the free trials. Like obviously sign up for the free trial, but if you know you're going to use it, I think they're huge time savers, and they're also really good for giving you, I do not have an arts background, but it is something that gives me tools that I can use to be able to create graphics and things whenever I don't have an artist that I can go to immediately, or if I need something in a pinch. And those are also really good because in Canva, I think on the Pro, you can create teams, you can make your own brand manual in there. So then it's all set up and then you just have it available for everyone. So I feel like whenever you start, don't try to do things maybe on your own and just say, I can get up and I can schedule this post and I can just post live and do all of it. Use schedulers, tools, everything that's available to you, because it will help so much.
I'll say
Mhm.
this as well. One thing that we've kind of focused on is like the visual side of it. We are talking about like podcasting because this is Pod Jam. Like no matter how beautiful your podcast looks, if you are not audible and the audio quality is not very good, like nobody's going to want to listen or watch you. So think about where you want to invest your time. If you don't, and money, if you don't have the funds, skill, or time to really go and create this beautiful and intricate overlay and have all this wonderful character and all of that, and you just have enough money to invest in a decent mic or, anything like that, focus on the audio.
Yeah.
Since this is Pod Jam, right? I would
Absolutely.
say
Yeah.
focus on the audio.
Oh, for sure.
We're all agreeing audio first.
yeah.
Audio
Yes.
first.
Camera second. No, yeah, but yeah,
Mhm.
marketing third. Absolutely.
Yeah, don't do what I did and have really bad audio. We didn't know what we were doing. We had people using the wrong side of the mic. So they were literally recording their voice bouncing off the wall. It was bad. But people still listen to us. Thank you for people for listening to us.
I think
I don't
every
know why.
listener through the early seasons of any show.
Yeah, it's either too
Yeah.
quiet or everyone's huddled around one mic, which is so rough. Yeah.
Mhm, mhm.
Been there.
But if you want to have that bang right from the get-go, please listen to us and then put your money, invest in the equipment that you're actually going to be using. Okay, so that's some 101 things that you just told your past self. So word of mouth advertising versus paid advertising. What are your experiences with both, and what are some best practices regarding them? Let's start with you, Nika.
So I feel like for word of mouth, that is kind of like what I would think of as like your everyday marketing. That's where I feel like you get the most value in terms of like creating community and creating opportunities for podcast crossovers and like story crossovers, or guest hosts and such like that. So I feel like the word of mouth marketing and social media is so important in terms of like building your support network in your community and in your industry. And then we use paid marketing more in terms of like just kind of getting it out there to your new people. We put money into doing Magic Tavern ads as like, you like them and you might enjoy us. And so it's something that it gives you that nice little like intro to your show. Like it gives the jumping off point for people. And that's where I feel like for marketing and social, it's doing something big is good for a little bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. Jen, what about you?
Yeah, sorry, and Nika, do you want to like bug you afterwards and find out how much that earwolf marketing was for Magic Tavern? As someone who's looked into it. Yeah, word of mouth by far one of the best ones, because the reason we all start playing RPGs or play different RPGs is hearing about people's experiences at the table. It's not like there's this really cool racing mechanic. It's like, let me tell you about how I was driving with my teeth while my grandma was playing grand piano in the background in this Pimp My Ride game, which doesn't exist, but it will. So word of mouth is beyond helpful, because it's also what gets you on possible panels like at a convention, whether it is virtual or not, in person, you know, in the 4 times and the later times. It's, again, it's people sharing those links with one another. But I will say paid advertising can help you get jumps for people that are beyond a friend of a friend of a friend online. The D20 Dames had like one of the last few opportunities to get in on that, the McElroy Adventure Zone advertisement, and we got a huge boost from that. Victoria and Daniel, like we've all done stuff with Wizards of the Coast at their D&D live events. Again, that has spread the word more about us as well. So it's also having people on our show and paying them to be on the show, because then they don't necessarily, it's not required that they advertise that they were on the show, but it's like something to be like, hey, I was on this cool thing with these nice people, I hope is what they're saying. And then, and that continues the like the fun too, because you want people to be brought into the universe, whether it's at the beginning, middle, or end. Hopefully, if you're doing your marketing, you're doing season reviews before each new season or new storyline to help people jump in so they don't have to listen to 4,000 hours if they don't want to. But yeah, I think paid, if you can do it, if you can get some money from your Patreon, your Ko-fi, buy me a coffee, whatever you're using, it is worth it to invest some as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think it depends on where you are, right? Because I think when we started, this was like, what are you going to do when you first begin your podcast journey, right? I think, you know, with this answer that, I mean, I personally am a big fan of word of mouth. Agents Representatives never really used paid advertising because that's just not a part of our values. It's not something that we kind of seek to do. I have used like paid market advertising for things like Kickstarters, things like that. Like on one end, like, you know, paid advertising is really great because, you know, it helps you acquire, you know, a new audience or a new potential customer if you're trying to market a product. But the thing that makes word of mouth so strong is that word of mouth is done by advocates, people who earn trust from others. And, you know, I mean, from a marketing perspective, we want to use marketing terminology, like word of mouth has far better targeting than any sort of paid acquisition, because people are going to be communicating with others of like values, right? And so that's why, you know, establishing what you are all about and how you speak and your voice and your identity and the identity that you portray as a show or a brand to your audience is super important, because they will then carry that onto, you know, anybody else that they introduce, right? It's like, you know, when you look at like social media and you think about like, okay, I need to have so many likes, or I need to have so many followers, or I need to have so many subscribers. So when you approach like a brand and you're like, well, we have this many listeners, or we have this many Twitter followers, these sort of like social media KPIs all mean really different things, right? If you're like, oh, you know, I see this this Twitter account and they have 10,000 followers, but every time that they tweet, they only get 5 likes. Well, what does that mean, right? Likes, like what are likes great for? Likes are like really useful to determine like if your content is of interest, right? Or it's like, well, what about comments on YouTube? That's direct engagement. Or about like sharing and retweets, right? If you're looking at your like Twitter feed, because in TTRPGs, pretty much the industry lives on Twitter, right? If you are looking at your Twitter feed, that in and of itself, you know, is a way for you to get news. But when you look at someone's Twitter page, be it a fan or somebody you're collaborating with or your brand, that's a story. And if somebody retweets your content, well, that's somebody caring enough to not only let others know, but make it a part of their story. right? So that in and of itself is also word of mouth. It's not just people talking to others and being like, oh, go listen to D20 Dames, or hey, go buy, this product, this comic, this trading card game, whatever. It's also people who are willing to share your content as a part of their social media story.
Okay. What
Agreed.
about
Agreed.
First off, before I get into a question, I want to say thank you to the person who donated $20. We are now at $450 total, which is $50 away from our goal, our $500 goal for the Trevor Project. Oh, we're now at 485.
Bless.
Ding,
Oh my
ding,
gosh.
ding. Thank you. Thank you so
Cow.
much. We are $15 away. Woo! Okay. So next question, what about sponsorships? Because this is something, I didn't mention this in my introduction, but I'm a community manager for Cobalt Press. So I'm approached by shows a lot about sponsorship. So I have a lot of, from a sponsor's point of view, I have a lot of opinions. But a lot of that for me is if you're looking for sponsorship, please, 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 please have a rate sheet. That rate sheet will, if you are trying to get someone to give you money, give them the rate sheet all the way at the beginning of that conversation. And that rate sheet, I'm going to talk about rate sheets with everyone else too, but this is I'm very passionate about this. Your rate sheet should have things like how many listeners do you have per episode in a month-long period? How many impressions do you get? What is your CPM? So your CPM is how many listens per thousand that you get. So what is your rate per CPM that you're going to be charging people? And we just hit $500. Thank you so much.
Hey,
Thank
nice.
you, everyone.
Thank you so
Well,
much.
day's over.
Awesome.
Thank you, everyone. Pack it in.
We're done.
Stream's over. Done.
Back it up.
Yeah, that's all you get. Yeah.
Marketing.
But and also tell people who you're sponsoring why your show is a good fit for them.
Mhm.
Who is your audience, and how does that audience jive with their audience, and how is your audience going to become part of their community? These are all things that your rate sheet should have. Now, I'm going to open this up onto the floor. Let's start with Nika again. How do you feel about sponsorships and rate sheets? And
So we actually have a different setup. We have an ad company. So people go through them, they go through Wondery, and then Wondery comes to us and says, hey, do you guys feel comfortable doing this? So I guess my experience is more sponsorships from like the podcast side, and also like tying that into social media is thinking about, you can get approached by a lot of companies, and one of the things is making sure to like pick companies that align with your podcast values, your community values, and any like obvious like personal things that you have. It's very easy to get a couple sponsorship like offers or something like that, and then you get that taste and you want to have some more, so you kind of just take everything that comes in, and that can be so detrimental to things. And it might be something in terms of even like really small, if you think about it, like just like a phone game or a gambling website kind of thing. Like you can think about it just as like, well, this is just an online game, but it might actually be like something else that has, so one thing is if you get sponsorships, think about how it aligns with your project. Do research on the company themselves, especially if it's something you haven't heard of or something small.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
couldn't agree more with aligning your values and ideals. The gross part of me is like, let's get that bag. But it's important because the people that are listening to your podcast, if they are aligned with the values that you have, they are more likely to then possibly go get this item or thing. D20 Dames, we are always looking for sponsors who are women or people of color. Everyone aside from myself is a woman of color, podcaster of color, and a person of, I didn't mean to be another POC, podcaster of color, sorry. My point being, we look for people that align with us and that make good quality products as well. We definitely have a sponsor sheet or a rate sheet that also has several different tiers too. So that way people can buy in at different areas. So whether it's they just want a straight ad, like 45 seconds at the top of the episode, mid or end, versus like they want multiples, some social media as well. We have an option that a couple people have taken, like the White Vault podcast, where we actually integrated a little bit of it into our own podcast story. That obviously is the most expensive and must be done very far out because Kat Kruger needs time to weave that into the rumors that we're hearing about. So I think offering, in addition to the demographic, your CPN, your impressions, all that information, giving people multiple options to support you. So that way they could be like, well, we'll try this. And then if we like it, after a couple months, maybe we can try this. There's also the types of sponsorships where you get a vanity code at a website, and people can use it to get a discount, and then you also get a kickback. That is great at the beginning, I think, if you are looking to get your name out there, because then that company is also helping spread the word. Like maybe you have dice or some type of cards or something. I'm trying to think of anything. Dice mats with like your characters' faces on it. Who knows? Like something like that. They're going to help push the marketing more so there. But it is less of direct money to then give to everyone else. So it's sort of balancing, and the point of having like business meetings in addition to your regular recording sessions that are important for people to talk about the gross other side of the podcast, the money-making part, the part that keeps it afloat.
Yeah, and I mean, like on top of like, if we're talking about money, one thing to make sure you're doing is if you decide that you're going to take on sponsors and you're going to handle money as a podcast, make sure you could do things, properly. Set up a business. Make sure that you have structures in place to make sure that you can be held accountable and you are transparent with how things actually function. A lot of podcasts will start and be like, we're gonna start taking on sponsors, and they don't have a bank account, or they don't have a registered business or anything like that. So think about this as you kind of grow. I mean, everything that said is like what I was gonna say. So I mean, y'all are great. But yeah, think about
but making that LLC boring, is so important. And
yeah.
So like, don't forget to send in your 6-month report, like all that stuff. Like ask people in your state too, if you can, or if they've given talks on it too, because it's different state by state, unfortunately.
Or province if you're in Canada.
Oh, province. yes. Or yeah.
Okay, we've talked about social media. We've talked about, getting sponsors and word of mouth and paid advertising. A huge part of marketing, and this sounds a little gross, and I'm sorry, y'all, but a lot of it is community and building that community. So but before we get into that a little bit deeper, I want to talk, what is the difference between marketing and community? Daniel?
Oh, that's easy. I wouldn't even say it's gross. I mean, some marketing can be gross. There are certain kinds of marketing that I personally would not engage with, because I don't think it's effective, and B, it's just not what we do. Like I personally hate giveaways. I think they suck. I mean, they're great for building up your following. It's like, follow me, like, retweet, and I'll give away this copy of this new book or whatever, right? But the big problem with that is like, oh yes, I have 11,000 followers because I did this giveaway. But when you actually want to do something of your own, and you're like, hey, I have this thing on Kickstarter, please back it. Nobody gives, can I swear? Producer? Am I allowed? Yeah. Nobody gives a fuck. Nobody gives a fuck about what you're doing, because they don't follow you for that reason. They follow you because they wanted this one free thing and they forgot, right? And they forgot that they're still following you.
Mm-hmm.
So like, think about how you actually want to market, because there are different ways to do that. And that being said, like the difference between marketing and community, like marketing, very, very simply, marketing refers to strategies. Okay. Marketing refers to strategies that get people in the door. Community refers to relationships and the experience that the user, that the audience, the consumer gets when they're through the door. Right. Mm-hmm. So the goals are different, right? This could be attract new customers and audience and promote your brand versus, connecting with your audience on a more personal level and encouraging engagement. Right. So think about how you want to market. This all leads back to what we were talking about before. Like the resources that you have. if you have minimal, financial resources, you don't need to do, paid advertising. Stick with word of mouth. I would personally rather have 100 followers or 100 subscribers that comment and watch or listen to every single thing I do than 10,000 listeners that are just a passive number, that don't give me any feedback, that don't give me anything in return in terms of like helping me improve their experience. Right. I see folks who do, when we're talking about community, who are like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set up a Discord server once we have a Patreon so that all the people who support us on Patreon have a space. But then that Discord server kind of just lives on its own and we don't have to worry about it because they gave us their money already. Right. For us, we set up a Discord server long before we even considered doing Patreon, mostly because we wanted a place where like-minded folks can gather and continue talking about our topics of discussion on the podcast, right? So we very much lean heavily into the community side of this, marketing versus community. But the thing is, they're not two things that are entirely separate from one another, or they aren't a linear path from marketing to community, right? Because your community also serves as that source of word of mouth marketing down the line. So if you want to see, authentic growth or an engaged audience, that is a very effective and trusted source of word of mouth advertising. Community is going to be something you really want to lean into. Yeah, that's my long-winded answer.
No, I could not agree more, especially on the having the community have a space where they can talk privately with one another and all of you. Having a Discord community, the D20 name started ours much later, just by virtue of what we had going on in our lives. But like, it has been, especially through the pandemic, like just a wonderful place. And but Victoria, I do see where like we could be gross. Like it's like if I'm going to bake something and I'm like, boy, it'd be great to take a picture of this and share it in the food channel on the Discord. That's when it could get like gross.
Well,
but
that's
like
when
who
it starts
does
to
that?
take over your life.
Yeah. Like I can't
when
live my life
everything
like
is
that.
content.
Yeah. Like that's not how we live it. So it's like, sometimes it's like everyone's posting just about like whatever art projects, and then like it shifts to food, it shifts to like everything's on fire, and like the blankets put fires out. So yeah, I think community is definitely, because they who are, yes, I'm sorry, I'm getting so excited about our community, because I feel like those people, they're not just they're your friends too. Like someone took our logo, Rage Cage, in chat and like made an embroidery of it, and then is a big part of our community. So like exactly.
My whole wall is all fan art, everything. Community.
Like, community is what it's about, because like it's a give and take relationship where you're hopefully both giving and not just taking, and that's another big difference.
It shouldn't be transactional. It shouldn't be transactional at the community level. It's so important to build these relationships, because like I love that you mentioned during the pandemic, because for me it's like the people who are in a Discord server is like, oh, these are my friends. These aren't our audience, right? They watch and listen to me, but these are my friends. These are people who I go and play games with every day.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, like played other games, not just like, hey, you listen to me and that's where our relationship ends. It's like, no, we play games together now. Like we do stuff, and like you go support them too, and because sometimes they're learning how to stream or how to podcast too. Sorry.
And the best thing about that Discord server is like, hey, let's make a channel where everyone can share their own shit.
Yes.
Like, right, super important.
Community, it started as a group of friends like listening to the podcast, and then we were like, hey, let's get together. I started as a listener before I got on the show, and so I was with the friends and we were like, let's get together, let's hang out and everything. And then it started to a whole convention. So every year now we have a convention, GeeklyCon, for our community, and it's like we put it as like a thank you, like you guys are the best, and here, let's get together and play games. And it's community is like, it's just the chef's kiss of podcasting.
Yes. Yeah. Oh man. So can't wait to hug all the community after this.
Oh, a hug with somebody who's not in my family.
What? Oh, look at Daniel. I live with people, not just a cat and a sweater I've stuffed and put in my bed.
I've got the cat, but my cat won't hug me. So
yeah. Yeah, but I hear you.
So riffing off of those answers of what community is, how do you use marketing to build that community?
Fan art.
I might even disagree that you use marketing to build your community. because that kind of gets into the gross side of things.
It
right?
does.
Well,
That it kind of gets to the gross, because you're not saying, oh, check out this fan art that this person did, join my community, because that's you soliciting for an ego boost, right? You don't want that. That one of the things that you could do is like, when you say use marketing, is it leverage the marketing resources that you have, like your channels or your shows, or is this like use paid marketing to be like, hey, check out all of these different pieces of fan art that we have? Like,
Yeah.
building a community, like, yes, you get people, like at the most fundamental level, like I said, marketing gets people in the door, and
Mhm.
community is what they experience when they're through the door. So in a sense, yeah, marketing builds community. But the thing is, marketing doesn't get people to stay in your community. It gets
Mhm.
people through that door, but they could walk right out, right? I think and not to like shit on your question, I just wanted to get some clarification. I think the important thing here is that, like, how do you get people to stay, right? Because
Yeah.
I know you had a question, like, what are some best practices in managing your community?
Yeah,
And I
that's
think
next.
and I don't think that like you would use marketing to build your community, because building your community and keeping people engaged is all about management, right? It's not a you need to acquire people, but you don't market to your existing community to be like, hey, stay in my Discord server, or like, hey, stay here. It's like, you don't want to do that, right?
Mhm.
So I personally would recommend we actually shift to the next question that you thoughtfully wrote down, because I think it's a more worth the time of the audience, since we only have so
Yeah,
much time left.
we only have so much time left, and I do want to answer questions. Does anyone, before we move on, does anyone have anything to add to that? Okay. So then you have your community now, and what are your best practices to manage it?
So yeah, this, like, going off of what Daniel said, and also like my day job as a narrative designer for video games, it's all about retention, baby. It's all about that D1, that D7, that day 30. And that is, it's about, again, creating a safe place. So like, it's taking those best practices that you have outside in the world and applying them to your community. So having mods or a set of rules that everyone must abide by, and speaking to people when they are out of turn or out of pocket, but then also coming in and like not just like creating the Discord and leaving, because they are also there to interact with you. They are hoping to get some small private access. So whether that is just talking to you, sharing stuff, and occasionally getting just emojis and stuff, or maybe you do private events, like you all watch a movie together or something. And I think it's a little bit of having access to you all in a different way than any listener off the street.
I love how the dames do the Saturday morning cartoons.
Oh man, we got to do that again. We watched the first season of Keepa that way.
Yeah, I love that you folks did that. I thought that was great.
Nika, what about you for managing and best practices of a community?
Oh, like one thing that like we just really focus on is just the trusted people within the community, the people who've been there from the very beginning, and just like having them as the, like, not necessarily like leaning on them, but the community has grown to the point where just us on the show can't really manage every aspect of it. So having people that you really trust, that uphold your values, and also are people that whenever someone comes in and is toxic or negative or disruptive, can stand up and say, no, you're not welcome here. This is a safe place, or this is our community, out. So just like picking those right people, and the community is like the ones that are going to be your word of mouth people. Those are your pillars, your foundation, really.
Mm-hmm. Daniel?
Yeah, I think the big thing about community is like really like, is it like management versus engagement are two things that you have to really consider. On one end, if you are, because we saw this with Critical Role, and they have a Critical Role community server, but they don't actually manage it, right? So if you're thinking about community and you're thinking about community spaces, there are two things that initially you want to consider. One, do you want to be hands off in a way where you are not liable for what happens there? In that case, it still has a feedback loop onto you, because it is still associated with your brand, while not legally, it still is, from like a visibility perspective. The second thing is, like, if you are going to maintain a community, I highly recommend thinking about how you will both manage and engage that community. Two separate things, right? One, yeah, Jen, you mentioned like folks having access to you. I think it's really important. But at the same time, it's also really important to, like every human being should, set personal boundaries and professional boundaries, right? And the Asians represent, Discord. A big one is like, a big rule is like, don't solicit POC members for cultural advice. Like, unless they offer, like, don't do that, right? So like, from a management perspective, it's like, yeah, you need to have moderators in place, admins in place for, the Asians Represent server. We have tons and tons of channels for talking about heavy stuff, video games, TTRPGs. We have multiple design channels if people are going to, have conversations about like dice math or something like that. The big thing with ours is that, this has slowly been an evolution. When you first join in, you have to acknowledge our community guidelines, react with an emoji. Once you react with an emoji to our community guidelines, it actually then lets you select a role. And by role selecting, you're actually able to select which channels you can even opt into, right? So you don't get overwhelmed, right? A big thing about managing your community is not only having rules and mechanisms in place for dealing with negativity or differences in opinion, conflicts, or anything like that, right? You need to have these in place. You can't just have the Wild West of a Discord server, right? So you need to have structure in place. But at the same time, you also need to think about the user experience. So for us, it was really important that people engage with what they want to engage with, and to understand that folks may just be in the server to watch and read what people post rather than to actively engage. And engagement is like kind of that second thing I want to talk about, right? A big thing with your community space and managing it and growing it is also encouraging discussions to help you improve your product, asking for feedback from your core audience. You want to improve their experience, and you want to, have everyone invested in what they consume and what you make, right? Because you could think that your show is absolutely perfect if you don't actually engage with your community. So for us, we make sure that we read every single suggestion that we get, right? We try to acknowledge every single one, and we try to consider and act on every single piece of feedback that we get, because these are the folks who have been with us since day one, or like last Friday. They found us last Friday, right? But we want to know what they think, right? And we want to have structures in place to solicit that feedback respectfully, right? And engage with it, in a timely and actionable manner. And that's where community is super important.
Mm-hmm.
I would also like to point out what you have done at Asians Represent. Like, you didn't just make an actual play with all Asian people. You saw a hole that was needed in the community, and you expanded so that you are dismantling, and like you're reading these old racist RPG books and being like, here's why we shouldn't have it. And like, you're making it, you're doing a lot of the work that people should be doing themselves, but you're making it accessible for everyone. And I feel like that is a big portion of like, you wanted to, maybe your first goal was one thing, but then seeing that you needed to broaden what you were actually putting out as your output. So not just having like a Q&A where then you have to address all of these things. You're like, let's meet it head on. And like,
but yeah, it's also like,
wonderful.
talking to people about what they want. Like we just started out as a discussion show, and then, COVID hit. Actually, a really big thing here is when we're talking about community, a big piece of feedback is that folks actually didn't like to engage with us as much on the audio feed, right? Because when you're thinking about like the pandemic and how people are interacting with your content, a lot of folks are like, well, I used to listen to you during my drive or my commute on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, whatever, right? But what happens when people aren't commuting, right? Now people have more time to engage on YouTube, on Twitch, and things like that. And so our community gave us a lot of feedback about that, and we actually pivoted completely and no longer add to our audio feed for most of our shows, because more people interact with us on other platforms. And we learned about that because of audience feedback. So yeah. I think it's so important to engage with your community, not only because you get insight, but because you just meet a lot of really fucking cool people. Like I would say like the majority of our guests that we have now are folks who have just been fans of the show or like what we do, or believe in our message, right? And so they're like, yeah, I want to be involved. How can I be involved? Thank you for asking. Let's do something. Right. We started off a discussion. Now people wanted to see, well, okay, you're talking about this stuff. How could you make it better? Yeah, let's do another actual play. Right.
I do want to add, you mentioned this at the beginning, and I do want to stress it, is you set your boundaries. We're talking about people being friends. There are parasocial relationships involved here. And I do want you to, because some people, like there are some people on my show on the Broadswords who are not comfortable really befriending everyone and opening themselves out to everyone, and that's okay. So if that's not something you're comfortable with doing, and you do want to have a bit of a barrier between you and other people, that is okay too. But engagement, you do have to engage with people, and you engage people in a kind manner. That suits me well, engaging kindly and compassionately with people. But also, it's okay. You don't have to give yourself to your audience, to your listeners.
Well, that's why it's super important to have those mechanisms in place. Like, how do you want to solicit feedback? How do you want to engage with folks, right? Like everyone gathering and watching cartoons together on a Saturday morning. I'm going to keep calling this back because whoever thought of that is genius at the Dames. Right, is a really great way for everyone to kind of like sit back. You could be off camera and kind of enjoy something collectively together, right? You could have a suggestions channel like we do on our Discord, but you could also have a form in place so people can, submit it, right? If you don't want to approach me on Twitter and be like, hey, Daniel, I really like the show. Can I talk about my thing here? Or, hey, I'd love to be involved. We have a website where you can submit a form so I can read it anonymously, or I can read it without you having to interact with me. Having structures in place is so important.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. We have just a little bit left, 12 minutes left. So we are going to take some questions from the audience. If you can, just so that I can see them, because look at my giant glasses, I need them for a reason. Please put the word question in capitals before your actual question so that I can see them. And also thank you everyone for who has donated. We have upped our goal to $750 because we reached 500. Yay! So thank you, everyone. Okay, questions. If I don't get any questions, I do have one more question left. We can talk about that until we get that. So what are some of the biggest barriers that you've come across when it comes to community, and how do you overcome them?
I have an answer, but I'd rather let other folks have spotlight.
I feel the same way. So Nika, you now must go first.
Oh
We're forcing you.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
Not
now that you put it,
Oh.
okay. Brain ADD. What was the question again? I'm so sorry.
What are some barriers that you've had to
barriers.
overcome when it comes to community?
I think one is like, don't give up on your social media if you don't get likes or shares or stuff. Whenever you're starting out, you probably will get 1 or 2 likes. You might, after you've been doing it for 5 years, get 10 likes on something. That isn't necessarily any sort of indicator of your quality of work. It is the algorithm, it is posting times, posting day. It's a whole bunch of stuff that could be working against you, but just keep it consistent, keep it authentic, and that will like absolutely keep your content like true to yourself, and then it will follow. Just stay what's that word? Oh my god, not motivated, determined.
Persistent, determined.
Yes.
Yeah.
Persistence is key too. Just keep it going and not letting things get you down.
Well, then now I'm going to come in and be like, but it's been a real rough 18 months. It's been a real rough life. And D20 Dames, we kind of, we take breaks in between seasons, but last year during a lot of the events and currently, like with, racist acts and all sorts of like murder happening. Like the group doesn't want to get together and work because we're too busy thinking about other things. And being honest with the community, just letting them, hey, like we're going to be a couple weeks late on this episode, or we need to take a break for a couple months because we need to take care of ourselves. I think being honest with them, I mean, or just, letting them know, not just disappearing, is the community will understand. So you don't have to give a reason on why you're not showing up, but just letting them know. Yeah. But letting them know you'll be back too. I think is really big.
Yeah. I think a really big one there is like for Asians Represent, we were like monthly, right? And then we were like twice a month. And then we were like, we're going to stream every week and do audio and do actual play and have this community. And while one thing that's really important is like everyone saw the sheer volume of content we were doing. First of all, like we were the first Asian podcast to ever win an Emmy award in podcasting, which first of all is baffling given that there are so many people who do this, right? Like we were doing something that's very, very different. And, for the viewer, for the audience, it's really easy for an individual to see how an organization, a brand, or a company can make the right move without understanding what it actually takes to do the work from the inside. And that's why transparency is super important. For basically 3 years, I did everything Asians Represent. So if you ever engage with Asians Represent, if you ever watch the show, listen to the show, I did everything: marketing, community management, production, writing, business, all of it, all the admin. But I wasn't transparent with our audience about that. And so people had really high expectations of Asians Represent without realizing that, like, hey, Daniel's got like a 9-to-5 job and a family and freelance work and all this stuff that he also does on top of Asians Represent. And doing the podcast was literally killing me. So we took a break, and we were really transparent about why we were taking a break, because it got to the point where there was more negative emotional return for the effort I was doing than anything that I was getting back emotionally. And I was basically, like 3 months ago, I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to kill Asians Represent. I'm just going to cancel the show. It's going to be over. Right. But once we were like super transparent with our community, they understood. So it's like, yeah, you know what? There's a lot of shit going on. People who look like me are just getting stabbed in the street in America. So like, I'm going to take a break. Right. Or, hey, you know what? In order to offload organizational burden off of one person, we need to start a Patreon so we can pay other people for their expertise so that it doesn't crush me and you can continue to enjoy the content. One thing that I will say, and this is definitely going to be a huge barrier when it comes to community, and this is almost like a tangential barrier, but one thing you want to be able to do is you want to ensure that you have time to engage in that community. So when you are developing your show, when you are getting things in place, make sure that you have very, very scalable goals. You don't want to say weekly actual play. We play 4 hours of D&D in a homebrew world with homebrew classes every day of like once a week or whatever, because you're going to burn out real fast. And you are also not going to have enough time to spend time with the people that matters in your personal life and your community. So for us, one of the things we do is, the great thing about Patreon is that you can set goals. And so what we've done is we've set goals based on patron number alone, not tiers, patron number, allowing us to slowly roll out our new season worth of content and add to it when we have the means to add new content. So really have to think long-term. The same thing goes back to sponsors, right? Yeah, somebody might offer you $100 to talk about their product, but is that product or is that sponsor going to turn away 100 people down the line because they don't believe in that, or it doesn't align with your values? So you have to think long-term, have to think long-term. And so like to kind of like harken back to your question, Victoria, is like, what is the biggest barriers when it comes to community? Is making sure you have time. Making sure you have time and the bandwidth to be transparent and authentic. Because it's really not about just pushing out content. It's about producing quality content.
We have time for one question because we have 4 minutes left. Also, we got another donation, so thank you. We have $555.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
And there's a new goal, right? $750?
$750.
750. Okay.
So we have a question from Dottie Vox. Now, this is a question, social media folks. Do you have recommendations for resources to keep up with the various social media algorithms?
Yeah. Don't think about the algorithm. Like if you're starting off, don't be like, I'm going to game the algorithm and I'm going to do this, because people see that, right? There are 2 resources that I highly recommend when you're starting out as a podcaster. The first one is a book. It's just the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. Read that book. You could find summaries online, so you don't have to pay for it. But read the book. It's a great book. Makes you really think about what you are putting out there into the world. So that's the first one. Great, fantastic book. Second one, Hubspot Academy. I have no financial stake in this at all. Hubspot Academy is a free certification website where you can actually get community management, social media marketing certifications. Really, really, really great place to start and think about how you're planning out your brand, how you're planning out your voice, what KPIs are going to be important to you down the line. Because if you start thinking about algorithms without a plan, you're going to fail regardless. So first start by getting knowledge. And that's going to be how to use your tools and what your show is going to be. So again, 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing and HubSpot Academy are fantastic places to start if you're brand new.
Sprout Social also has some great articles that you can go and find for free too.
Yeah, my 2 tiny cents are don't be afraid to reuse audio clips you have, art, whatever. Assume that someone has not seen it before. Just because you've posted it once does not mean everyone saw it. So do not feel bad about that. And the second one is most of the actual social media sites now have very good metrics. I used to pay for other things, but what I found was the ones on Instagram and Twitter are actually better. And Twitter has one where it shows you your number one, whatever, the follower with the most amount of people that followed you that month, or your best performing tweet. It also, you can find out the best times for your content and how that's interacting with people that are already following you. So by the transmutable property, your podcast or whatever, most likely you can sort of shift some of your posting times to around those same times. And that's the thing is it's not that the algorithm is changing for everyone. It's depending on what you're posting about, whether it's video game entertainment, politics, cute animal pictures, always good anytime. So that's the other thing is go with what's working for you, which may take some experimentation as well.
We have 1 minute. So how about everyone says adieu and thank you, who you are, where we can find you, and all of that wonderful jazz. Nika.
You can find me on Twitter and pretty much every social media at Nika_Howard. Also on Greetings Adventures. We are a weekly released real play. We stream every Tuesday night, 8:30 in Eastern, 7:30, 8:30, 8:40 Eastern. Who knows?
There's a time. Follow them on socials.
Yeah. I'm on D20 Dames at D20 Dames. Post every 2 weeks. I am also on an actual play for Ryutama, Poison of Prophecy, at Crodex. And I am a narrative designer for Transformers Heavy Metal for Niantic. So if you are a fan of Pokemon Go, we want to see some big bot grundles. Yeah. Go to TF Heavy Metal and sign up, and we'll let you know wherever you are as soon as it goes live. Thank you.
Daniel.
Jen's Instagram is popping, by the way. I'm a follower. I like your stuff. I think you're great.
Same. Oh man.
Yeah, you could find me pretty much anywhere on the internet at Daniel H. Kwan, danielhkwan.com. From my page, you can find Asians Represent, AZNS Represent on pretty much everything else as well.
And I have been your moderator, Victoria Rogers. You can find me at Mimi Merlot on Twitter and at The Broadswords on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you learned some stuff. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.